Hello everyone. This video will let you understand AWS Parquet file format and easily view, create, and process such files with the Carpenter. All this with no scripting, coding, or any deep technical knowledge, but a simple graphical user interface. I will first start to expose some basic concepts of the Apache Parquet file format. Then we'll show how the Carpenter can help you easily deal with this type of files. Let's start by understand some different ways of storing data. For simplification, we will use a two-dimension structure, a matrix composed of rows and columns, which is the most common way of thinking of structured information. Here we want to store 5 records, with a numeric identifier, a name, and a birth date. The first, intuitive way of storing this information in memory or in a file, is to sequentially store these records. This is row-based storage, and is the approach used by CSV files. It has the benefit of speeding up access to all elements of a record, which can be beneficial when searching for records according to some filtering criteria. Another slightly less intuitive way of storing information is to use a columnar-based storage. As you can see, we would first store in sequence all values of the first column, then all values of the second one, and so on. This file organization has the obvious benefit to limit file scanning when all we are interested in is the full set of values for one column. These two formats both show some benefit, so we can attempt to optimize our storage by using a hybrid approach, to define a fixed size of columns grouped together, and then store a set of rows with this columnar storage. For example, here we used a row group size of 3. So stored the first 3 values of first, second, and third column, then a second group of columnar storage records. The last group will only store the remaining values of each column. Since we have a total of 5 records in our example, of course we only have a single group. Now, we can add some metadata to each group of records, like minimum and maximum values present in each column of the group. We can also include some overall metadata like the column's definition, a header label, and a data type. We can also document in the file metadata the compression algorithm used, and store the compressed version of this file content. This, overall, shows the basic concepts of what does compose an AWS Parquet file. The overall conceptual view of this file shows groups of slates, which lets you understand why the analogy with a parquet was used to name this type of files. What would be the benefits of such a structure? Well, first, performance can be much better than either the rows of records format or the columnar first storage, both for scanning and filtering rows, and for selecting a full set of values for one column. Filtering out irrelevant groups of records can be done only by reading the metadata attached to each group. Secondly, since values can be very similar in a column, the compression ratio and efficiency is also drastically improved, even if of course this depends on the group size configuration, also ending up in optimizing file reading. With file metadata, we also have structure benefits compared to a basic CSV file, with improved data integrity. Since the AWS Parquet format is open source and technology agnostic, it can be used by using a variety of programmation languages and software. Our example was using a structure based on simple data types, but bear in mind that AWS Parquet supports complex data types for storing nested structures.
Now that you know a bit more about the Apache Parquet format, let's see how the Carpenter can help you to easily manage those files. I am opening here S3Man, the AWS Simple Storage Service Manager, which is one of the tools offered by jackapps.org. This tool will allow us to access files stored on the AWS Cloud S3. Once the region where my cloud storage service is hosted, I can view the different available buckets of files. Under Jack Buckets, I can see some files. Could download them to my local laptop or also upload new files. Double-clicking a file provides some technical details about it, its MIME content type, modification date, type of encryption, and if tags are attached to it. On this one I can see for instance that 2 tags are attached. I can also check the values of these tags. And if I have privileges to do so, can also add, modify or delete tags and values. Once a Parquet type of file is selected, I can also open it through the Carpenter icon below. Here I am looking at the Titanic passengers list. You can see that instantly, this file gets opened in the Carpenter, leveraging the Parquet metadata to handle correctly how the file shall be displayed. The Carpenter shows a simple interface, with a list of columns on the left side, and the content on the right side. On the bottom status we can see number of rows and columns in the file. Let's sort the rows by name. A contextual menu provides many selection and search functions can help you analyze the file, with a variety of search capabilities as you can see from this search dialog. You can also quickly check the distinct values of a column. Here I can see the distribution of the sex column and select the related rows for value female. Another feature, rows comparison, allows to quickly check similarities and discrepancies between rows. Look at the Allison family here for instance, and what is common to these three rows. And now what is different amongst the three rows. A last feature provides a recap of any column content. For instance this P-class column detail dialog, showing min and max value and total number of not null values. You can check the video about Carpenter which provides much more details on the analysis and profiling capabilities, since the two tools share a lot in common. You can also alter metadata of the file. Here for instance I am changing the header of the sex column to gender. And I add a default value for empty rows, unknown for instance. We can then create a new Parquet file, that will leverage the alterations made. This file is stored locally and you can then decide to upload it onto your S3 space using the S3 man tool. Now, sometimes you want to build up a Parquet file from scratch, or most probably from an existing Excel file or CSV file that you edited. This is where the CSV import functionality comes handy. Since CSV files do not provide metadata, you will need to configure the import by selecting the right column separator. Here I will select the pipe separator. Then, still by mentioning if the file contains a first row of headers, or if we need to use default headers. The code page allows to import files that were maintained using a specific character set, which will be automatically converted to Unicode in Parquet format. By default, all columns are assumed to be strings, since a CSV file does not define specific data types. But the tool includes a wizard for discovery of data types, and will use the best fitting data type based on a sample of up to 1 million rows from the imported file. I recommend ticking this option by default. Once configuration is done, you can then select your file to import. Here's some list of cars characteristics. You can see that the data types were correctly guessed for all columns. This file, imported from CSV, can immediately be converted to the Parquet format, by saving it under a new name. Again, you can go back to S3 Manager to upload it to AWS if you want. Of course, before creating this Parquet file, you can further enrich it with metadata like default values, change of data types, and so on. The opposite operation, exporting a Parquet file to a CSV file, or an Excel file or HTML table, is of course possible, if you want to edit it in Excel for instance. You can also generate immediately an XML version of this file, or a JSON export of the full content. Let's close the export dialog. The last option of the tool is to display the metadata of any Parquet file, as a JSON structure. Now that you have seen the basic features of the Carpenter, let's check a practical example of processing using a variety of functionalities we explored. Let's open again the Titanic Parquet file. I will export its content to the clipboard since it is not a large file. Now I am opening Carpenter and importing my clipboard in a grid. I want to generate a random file, and will take as a profile this current grid. Carpenter did analyze the file and found out the following patterns. I think the first column can be adjusted by generating a sequence. And the creation of random names can also be adjusted to use a real names generator. You can see the modifications in the 12 sample rows generated below. I want to generate a bigger file, so let's configure for 10,000 records. That's it, we now have a dummy file, very similar to the structure of the Titanic list of passengers, but with full dummy data and 10,000 records. Let's save this file as a CSV file. I can now go back to the Carpenter and import this CSV file. Let's check the data types, the number of columns, and the number of rows that were imported. All looks correct, so I can now save this file as a new Parquet file. In a matter of minutes, we took a Parquet file, converted it to a CSV format, profiled it to analyze the structure, then generated a dummy CSV file matching the same structure, and converted it back to Parquet. All this without coding or using command lines, but a simple user interface. This was a quick introduction to the Carpenter tool. I hope you enjoyed the simplicity of the tool, and will see value in using it. Don't hesitate to check the other jackapps.org tools, which bring much advanced features, specifically Carcep if you are interested in CSV files generation, management, profiling, and automated transformations.